I call this meeting to order. This is meeting number 37 of the Standing Committee on Finance. Our orders of the day pursuant to the order of reference of Tuesday, April the 8th, 2014, dealing with clause by clause of Bill C-31, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on February the 11th, 2014, and other measures. Colleagues, as you know, we have both today and Thursday for clause by clause. My hope as chair is that we get through parts 1 to 4 today. We'll see if we can. Obviously, it'll depend on members' input. We do have a notice of motion in the name of Mr. Cullen, and he's indicated he'd prefer to move that at the outset of the meeting. So if, Mr. Cullen, if you're ready, I'd go to you for you to move your motion, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a motion that follows. It's connected, obviously, with the study that we're doing and the clause by clause we're working on now with respect to the Budget Implementation Act. It came up through testimony, Chair, and my friends across the way will have heard this as well, that certain provisions around the temporary foreign worker program and what changes were going to be enacted within this bill. We wanted to make this motion available and assume there would be some interest from all sides. I'm not sure about my Liberal colleague or Madame May, who I know has joined us here today, but certainly from the Conservatives, to allow the Minister to speak to both the changes that he's proposed through this Budget Implementation Act, which are new, and also some of the revisions that he's spoken about at press conferences and in question period, but more succinctly to the Finance Committee and what the impacts of those changes might be to some of the concerns that have been raised by, I think it's safe to say, all sides of the House around the way the program has been conducting itself and its impact on the economy. So I don't want to take a great deal of time. This is a gauging of interest from my friends across the way. I don't know if they will have checked in with the minister's schedule yet, but that's a typical and appropriate process that we use. And we wanted to give Minister Kenny the opportunity to come before the committee at a time that's appropriate once we're done, obviously, this work. That would make some sense for us and certainly give him the opportunity to walk us through what changes are going to be implemented through this Act and other changes that he's made through regulations and beyond. So ça c'est tout. C'est une opportunité pour le ministre donnez-nous.
Well, that's all really. It's an opportunity for the Minister to give us new information, but it's also an opportunity to improve the program. And I think this is a broken program, and I think it has a serious impact on our economy. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Cullen.
My understanding that Minister Kenny has already been before committee on this very subject. He was there for 2 hours, and that both opposition parties had ample time to ask lots of questions of the minister at that time. So why would we simply duplicate and replicate what's already been done in another committee? So, Chair, we cannot support this motion.
Mr. Saxton, I'll go back to Mr. Cullen.
Well, a couple of things that are not replicative. One is that we have new changes that have been made in the Budget Implementation Act that we're dealing with right now. We assume that this week, with the schedule that we've adopted, Chair, there will be changes made. Secondly, from our understanding that the testimony of the Minister prior to this at the other committee had less to do with some of the concepts and issues that would be dealing with as the Finance Committee, particularly around the effects on wages, the effects on labor market impact that the Finance Committee is particularly adhered to. So while my friend across the way may feel that one session on a different part of the temporary foreign worker program is exhausted, I would have thought that the government would have been open and encouraging of such an opportunity. I know Mr. Kenny is a capable minister and can certainly handle a few questions from the opposition.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bryson, please, on this.
Yeah, we support this motion. These provisions are part of the Budget Omnibus bill, the Budget Implementation Act. And again, there's an opportunity, I think, for the Minister to be accountable to this committee that's responsible for the passage of these changes. And as Mr. Cullen said, there's no doubt that Mr. Kenny will not be feel in any way, shape, or form intimidated by this committee. I'm certain if the invitation were extended, he would accept it gleefully. In fact, so.
Okay, thank you. Further to this, Mr. Keddy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think Mr. Saxon has said it correctly. The minister's already spoken at length on this subject. The members had a chance to attend the committee he was at if they could have subbed in or if they wished to. This is just simply a matter of trying to go over something where the opposition think they have a bit of traction, and really there's no traction there. The minister has been very accountable for the changes made to the program. He's been accountable in question period. This subject is closed, quite frankly.
Thank you. Thank you. I will move then to a vote. Then all in favor of Mr. Cullen's motion, please. I see 4. All opposed? I see 5. That motion is defeated. Okay, colleagues, we will then start with clause by clause. We'll welcome back for part 1, we'll welcome back our officials from the Department of Finance, Mr. Ted Cook and Mr. Miodrag Jovanovic. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Welcome back. And I'll just highlight for part 1, we have 5 amendments in total on part 1, and we'll be dealing with clauses 2 to 31. Now, pursuant to Standing Order 75-1, consideration of Clause 1 short title is postponed. Therefore, I shall move to Clause 2. And colleagues, as you know, there is a 5-minute, the chair is supposed to do a 5-minute time limit. As I've spoken to members, I'd prefer to be somewhat flexible on that. And if we can group some clauses together in which perhaps there's agreement to go to a vote, and then allow members perhaps a longer time to speak to their amendments. So I do not have any amendments for clauses 2 to 39. Sorry, 2 to 26. Anyone want to speak to any of the clauses 2 to 26? Mr. Rankin?
Thank you, Chair. And while I certainly, the New Democrats support the intent of Clause 2, for example, and provisions.
So you want to speak to Clause 2?
I just want to speak to Clause 2, and it's
okay.
actually the short version of it, the tax informant program, the notion of it being a offshore tax informant program.
This is discussion on Clause 2, then.
That's correct. Yes, I simply want to say that while we support it in principle and will vote for it, really, as has been said about this budget and provisions in past budgets as well, I think the appearance is much greater than the reality of doing something to address tax revenue losses. This year, the amount of money in offshore tax havens has hit $170 billion and steadily growing. The amount of money we're losing is between $5 and $7.8 billion a year. Sort of the notion of this being a sort of a tax informant program overstates its impact, but nevertheless, we'll support it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rankin. Mr. Caron, sur le même sujet.
No, it's on a different clause, in fact. Another article, in fact, or section.
Clause 2 carries. Which clause would you like to speak to, Mr. Caron?
I don't know if you can actually just go straight. It's going to be 24 and 25. And we have some more as well.
So shall Clause 3 to 23 carry? Is that too many? Okay, just indicate which one you want to speak to.
I think Mr. Fallon wanted to speak on a different one, if you can wait.
Sure.
You wanted to speak to an early one.
Part 7, I think Mr. Rankin.
Part 27?
Mm-hmm. The volunteer firefighter tax credit.
So shall clauses 3 to 6 carry then?
Yes, and just on the Clause 7,
okay,
if I may.
Okay,
Clause 6,
okay,
yes.
Sorry,
yes. Okay, I'm sorry, yes.
Shall clauses 3 to 6 carry?
Yes.
Carried? Okay, carried.
My apologies,
Clause
Chair.
7, debate.
Yes, and we, we certainly support this. We're glad to see the government adopting the idea of a volunteer firefighter tax credit. It was something the New Democrats had in their 2011 platform. It's long overdue for our brave volunteer firefighters. We wholeheartedly support this long overdue measure.
Okay, further discussion, Clause 7? Recorded vote on Clause 7.
Mr. Adler. Mr. Allen. Mr. Keddy.
Yes.
Mr. Saxton.
Yes.
Mr. Van Kesteren.
Yes.
Mr. Caron. Mr. Cullen. Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Bryson.
That is carried. Okay. Now, just what is the next clause members wish to discuss? Can I group any more together? Or?
8 through 22, or through 23 is probably.
22.
Okay. Shall clauses 8 through 22 carry? Yes. Okay, 8 to 22 carry. We will now move to clause 23. Discussion on clause 23. Or we could proceed to a vote on 23. Okay. Can I group any more together, or?
We need to speak on 24, please.
Okay, shall clause 23 carry? Yes? Clause 23 carries. Colleagues, I see the bells. We have 30-minute bells. There's a vote at about 4:10 p.m. Can I ask for unanimous consent to go to about 5 to 4? Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go to clause 23 carried? So clause 24, discussion. Mr. Cullen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is one of those clauses. I can only hope this is the unintended consequences version of a Budget Implementation Act. There's been no logical economic argument offered by the government to get rid of labor-sponsored funds and the tax credit associated with them. We asked officials, we asked witnesses. The government preferred no witnesses that were able to come forward. This was particularly advantageous to small and medium businesses in Quebec. The transition out of this fund and this opportunity for venture capital makes zero sense at all, particularly as the fragile economy that my Conservative colleagues continue to talk about. We heard from witnesses that labor-sponsored venture capital corporations and the tax credit that was associated to those programs was incredibly helpful and advantageous. There's no compromise solutions been offered up by the government. There's no other fill-in program that would offer venture capital a way into this particular market. And the venture capital market, as my friend Mr. Adler would know in Canada, is at a great disadvantage to that of the U.S., for instance. And so for the notion for the Conservative government to say that a venture capital program that was working, as this one was, effectively by every witness that we heard from, we didn't hear anybody saying it wasn't worth government expenditures or a waste of time. We heard none of my Conservative colleagues speak against it either that I can recall. Makes zero economic sense. So, of course, the official opposition, the Democrats, will be voting against. And again, I find it somewhat surprising that through the testimony that we heard that was overwhelmingly compelling, that this was a program that was effective, brought venture capital money to the table, sponsored and co-jointly with Labour, which, again, made sense. Long-running program, very effective for Canadian small and medium businesses in particular. So much for prosperity from my Conservative friends across the way. So that's what I wanted to say on the LSVCC tax credit phase-out.
Okay. I have Mr. Caron and then Mr. Saxton.
Merci.
Yes, thank you very much. The committee knows that I've been very vocal on this subject. Last year, we heard from several witnesses from the Labour-sponsored fund and also from private funds. It's been clearly demonstrated by the venture capital industry that these Labour-sponsored funds are essential, that the elimination of this tax credit will jeopardize the health of the venture capital sector, the impacts being feeling in Ontario when venture capital, when the tax credit was eliminated there. It was felt Quebec is one of the provinces that wants to keep this. But Nova Scotia also. Nova Scotia and Quebec, well, it's to their benefit, really. It will be to their benefit to develop the venture capital sector. Why? Well, Canada is tail end Charlie, really, in terms of the OECD. Canada is behind the US and Israel, for example. So the government by ending this tax credit without an impact study on the level of venture capital in Canada is not the right thing to do. the government is making this new amendment now. I would urge the government, and I'm sure they'll vote in favour of eliminating this policy, this measure, to really review the impact of your decision, especially if you really think that venture capital and the Canadian economy are important. This is why we'll be voting against this part of the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know where my honourable colleagues were when the witnesses were here, but there were numerous witnesses who said that this particular program is no longer effective, it's not working. In fact, it had already been eliminated by some of the provinces involved as well. In fact, I don't think Mr. Cullen was even on the committee at the time that we had the witnesses, so I understand why he wouldn't have heard that. The government recognizes the importance of venture capital, which is why we have established and implemented the Venture Capital Action Plan for this very reason, so that it's more effective and more efficient at getting capital where it's needed to promote jobs and a healthy economy.
Thank you, Mr. Saxton. Mr. Bryson first.
Just to further to Mr. Saxton's comments, I was present actually during the testimony, and we did hear from several expert witnesses and members of the Canadian venture capital and private equity community who expressed that the VCAP program is not up and running, that in the interim to eliminate the labor-sponsored venture capital tax provisions is irresponsible and threatens an already precarious venture capital industry in Canada, disproportionate impact in Quebec and in parts of the Atlantic Canada, but it affects the whole country, and it's a very important part of our innovation economy, and one that certainly these changes ought not occur until the VCAP program is fully operable. Further to that, I attended recently the Canadian Venture Capital Association annual meeting here in Ottawa, and speaking to members of that organization there, many of them felt that, in fact, the VCAP program is not fully operable yet, and as such, we don't support these changes.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Caron, s'il vous plaît.
En réponse aux commentaires.
Well, in terms of what Mr. Saxton has said last year, I sat on this committee, I heard from the witnesses. There was only one from somebody from the University of Calgary who really backs up what Mr. Saxton has said. The Canadian Association of Venture Capital, we had the Federation of Quebec Chambers of Commerce. There were even witnesses from the government itself working in the industry or representing the IT industry. And when they were told that the labour funds, the labour venture capital funds were proposing to invest in the government venture capital program to triple the amount of money invested by the government, and this would be in exchange for not reducing the tax credit, the government would have benefited from an additional $2.2 billion in exchange for the $250 million that they intend to cut. And the government said no to that. I think that my memory of the testimony and what happened last year at this committee, and this year in fact, really fully reflect the fact that the Canadian venture capital industry wants to keep this tax credit, that business people and business leaders, especially in Quebec, want this tax credit to be kept, and even business leaders outside Quebec, when they hear about the contribution that labour funds could have made to improve venture capital in Canada, well, they agree when they hear that. So I think that your arguments really don't hold water. Once again, I would invite my friends on the government side to review their position, so that we can make sure that the venture capital sector in Canada is healthy.
Please.
Well, thank you, Chair. And, I wasn't going to say anything on this until Mr. Cullen actually mentioned my name, so I feel obligated to respond. As far as the LSVCCs go, the empirical evidence is somewhat clear that these funds are underperforming, and that they lag in both U.S. and Canadian indices. So it's wrong to say that uniformly that the evidence that we heard here today was, or heard in the past before our committee, was that all of the funds are performing well and that they should be retained. It wasn't a scientific sampling of what we heard, and the empirical evidence is clear that they are underperforming, not only here but also in the U.S. too. So there is a reason why they are being changed as the way they are. So I just thought I would clarify that for Mr. Cullen.
Glad you did.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Keddy, add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we're taking our time here and everyone's going to have their say, then I'll have mine as well. What's interesting here, and I agree, exactly with what Mr. Adler said, but there's this is all about tactics. The opposition parties want to vote on single items so they can vote for them at committee and then vote against them later on when the bill comes to Parliament. I mean, it's fairly obvious. So if you take that train of thought and those tactics, and then you take paragraph A, in Clause 24, which provides that a corporation may not issue shares that are eligible for tax credits on or after the day that it notifies the minister that it intends to revoke its registration. So what they're essentially saying is that the corporations that have notified the minister that they're revoking their registration should be able to still get the tax credit. And I can't support that. However, somehow they have squared that circle.
Okay. I sense that neither side is going to convince the other. I'm just putting that out there. We can keep the.
I almost had Mark. He thinks he almost had me. You see.
Little hint to members: if they don't want to keep the debate going, don't poke the other side. But that's just my sense. Monsieur Caron.
J'espère que je vais finir avec ceci, mais encore une fois.
I hope this will be an end to it, but in response to what Mr. Adler said, I don't think there is empirical evidence. There's one study that was done in Calgary on the way Quebec funds work. I understand the venture capital industry in Quebec and the labour funds Mr. Mintz really failed to understand how things work. I don't think you can say that on the basis of one study that we could conclude, especially given the rest of the testimony, that this program isn't working. In some cases, perhaps funds are not performing well, or as well as a venture capital fund, but it's a way for Quebecers to save. This is why Quebec is now a high performer in terms of personal savings. And we shouldn't forget that. In terms of what Mr. Keddy said, well, if the government was prepared to separate, to divide the clauses so that we can vote in favour of them, well, you'd get the same result. We'd vote in favour of the good measures and we'd vote against the bad ones. And everybody would be happy, all right? Mr. Saxton.
Here, I don't expect my colleagues in the opposition to take my word for it, but perhaps they could take the word of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, which says that these labor LSVCCs are not working to promote economic growth and jobs. In fact, it goes on to say, and I quote, "The LSVCCs have distorted the market for venture capital, lowering the average quality of deals and limiting the supply of equity to non-traditional industries and newer companies. The governance structure of LSVCCs leads to less skilled fund managers and poorer fund performance. Overall, the damaging effects of the LSVCC tax credits on the financing of innovation, along with their fiscal costs, present a clear argument for their elimination." And that is the 2006 OECD Economic Survey.
Thank you, Mr. Saxon. I have Mr. Bryson and Mr. Caron.
Just to follow on Mr. Saxton's evidence from the OECD, he's asking us to consider that evidence, and I was wondering whether he would consider the OECD evidence that the CPP is sustainable without raising rather the eligibility age of the OAS from 65 to 67.
We'll get to that when we debate the CPP. Monsieur Caron, s'il vous plaît.
Oui. À ça, Monsieur le Président, je répondrai simplement en premier.
Well, I'd just like to mention that the OECD studies compares apples with oranges. Now, the fact is that the Quebec system works very well. Labour fund or labour-based venture capital in Quebec really work very well. But the studies really didn't look at the Quebec reality. It is the case, of course, that these funds undermine private venture capital funds. This is why the private venture capital industry explained to us that we should keep Labour-sponsored funds because they're complementary, really. So if the reality on the ground was reflected by the OECD report, we wouldn't have private venture capitalists really plead for the maintenance of this program.
Recorded on clause 24, recorded vote.
Monsieur Adler. Monsieur Allen.
Yes.
Monsieur Keddy.
Yes.
Monsieur Saxton.
Yes.
Monsieur Van Kesteren. Monsieur Caron.
No.
Monsieur Cullen.
No.
Monsieur Rankin.
No.
Monsieur Bryson.
Okay, that clause 24 carries 5-4. Colleagues, I will suspend the meeting at this time, and we'll go to the House and vote. And please do come back as quickly as possible. We will resume with clause 25. Thank you. I call this meeting back to order, meeting number 37 of the Standing Committee on Finance, dealing with Bill C-31. Colleagues, we dealt last with Clause 24. We do have an amendment for Clause 27. Is there any discussion on Clauses 25 or 26? Okay. Shall Clauses 25 and 26 carry? Clauses 25 and 26 on... You want a recorded vote on which one? Or
25?
Okay, recorded vote on Clause 25.
Monsieur Adler. Monsieur Allen. Monsieur Keddy. Monsieur Keddy. Monsieur Saxton. Monsieur Van Kesteren. Monsieur Caron. Monsieur Rankin. Monsieur Bryson. Sorry? It's no?
Okay, that is carried, 5-3. Shall Clause 26 carry? Yes. Yes, Clause 26 carries. So we'll go to Clause 28. I have our first amendment there. Sorry, Clause 27, yes. We have NDP 1. And I will ask, who will speak to NDP 1?
Yes, just 1 second.
Give you a second.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of our proposed amendment, NDP 1, is to delete reference to new penalties under the FATCA Intergovernmental Agreement implementation. And the Clause 27 appears to be makes failing to comply with the new subsection 267 an offense punishable by summary conviction. Obviously, we're not in favor because we don't like the imposition of FATCA, as you'll hear when we get to those provisions. I think that's what we're talking about. So we're moving to strike the reference to subsection 267 from Clause 27, so it's not an offense to not comply with this FATCA implementation measure.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion, Mr. Saxton?
Chair, we can't support the NDP's move on this particular Clause 27 because this motion would prevent an existing provision which generally makes it an offense not to keep and retain records required for income tax purposes from applying to financial institutions in respect of new Part 18 of the Income Tax Act. And Part 18 gives effect to the Canada-U.S. Enhanced Tax Information Exchange Agreement, and this offense applies in respect of the general recording keeping requirements in the Act, and therefore it should also apply in respect of the record-keeping obligations of financial institutions under Part 18.
Well,
okay, thank you. We'll go back to Mr. Rankin.
We understand the logic of what Mr. Saxon has said, but of course this all revolves around our opposition to including the FATCA provisions in this so-called Budget Act, and we'll come to those provisions later. This essentially is consequential to our opposition to that part of the Budget Implementation Act. So we stand by the position that we've articulated in our amendment, and I suppose we would seek a recorded vote on this measure.
Okay. We'll have a recorded vote on NDP 1.
Monsieur Adler. No. Monsieur Allen.
No.
Monsieur Keddy. No. Monsieur Saxton. Monsieur Van Kesteren. Monsieur Caron.
Oui.
Monsieur Cullen.
Oui.
Monsieur Rankin.
Oui.
Monsieur Bryson.
Yeah, NDP NEP1 is defeated 5-4. We will then move to the vote on Clause 27. Shall Clause 27 carry?
Vote. Yeah.
We could always pass some on division, just a suggestion. It's an option on division. Okay, recorded vote. Clause 27, recorded vote.
Mr. Adler.
That was on NEP 1.
Mr. Adler. Mr. Allen. Mr. Keddy. Mr. Saxton. Mr. Van Kesteren. Mr. Caron. Mr. Cullen. Mr. Rankin. Mr. Bryson.
Okay, it's carried 5-4. We'll move then to Clause 28. We have two amendments there. We have NDP 2, and I'll ask someone from the NDP to address that. We'll go to Mr. Rankin.
This is a clause that has been the subject of enormous debate in the media, and of course with the Privacy Commissioner of Canada talking to us, testifying before this committee. The notion of warrantless disclosure of taxpayer information to police under these sweeping set of circumstances is something that we utterly oppose, and the purpose, therefore, of our amendment would be to introduce court oversight of information that's turned over to the police. This, of course, is the Canadian way. This is reflected in countless statutes in the Income Tax Act and a variety of other measures. The notion, first of all, we certainly support cracking down on corruption and terrorist financing, but this is way beyond that. It would, of course, apply to anyone suspected of any offense with a mandatory minimum. And it's a very long list since the Conservatives came to power of offenses with mandatory minimums. And so we have proposed this amendment to provide court oversight of those transfers to ensure that these powers are not abused.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Rankin, I'll go to Mr. Keddy, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little surprised by the NDP motion. Quite frankly, it's obvious that they've not read the clause nor really looked at their amendment. What the clause actually does, and would allow an official with information that may afford evidence of a serious offense to submit that information to a federal court judge. Not to police forces. So I'm a little bit surprised.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's certainly not how we read the clause, nor is it how the Privacy Commissioner read the clause. As I understand it, it says an official may provide law enforcement information to police organizations of a variety of offenses. I see no reference to the courts in this provision. That's, of course, the basis of her concern, and some editorials across the land have written very powerfully about the reason this is out of sync with Canadian privacy laws and indeed the Constitution. It's only a matter of time before it's struck down. Let's do the right thing here.
Okay, thank you. Go back to Mr. Keddy, please.
Yeah, the issue here is really quite simple, Mr. Chairman. When CRA officials uncover evidence of serious criminal activity, they should be able to share it with law enforcement. We have to find a mechanism to do that. That's what everyone, I think all the Canadian public expects. There have been occasions when CRA officials in the course of ordinary duties have uncovered evidence of drug trafficking, of other child pornography, contracts for the commission of murder, and have been restricted from conveying that information to law enforcement. So contrary to what they're saying, that the police will not be able to direct the CRA. CRA will turn information over for serious crime to the police department, which is only proper.
Thank you. Order. The chair has to recognize the speakers. Go to Mr. Bryson first, please.
To Mr. Keddy's point, CRA would still be able to provide the information to police if a judge felt it were warranted. And that is where we have the safeguard current. We would recommend maintaining a safeguard that would require a judge's engagement and warrant.
Thank you. Mr. Rankin, please.
Yes, we agree. Mr. Keddy talked about serious criminal activity identified by the CRA. Of course, that begs the question of who the CRA are to do that, to know what is a crime. The whole purpose, the safeguards of the Constitution, are to require our judges as independent officers to assess whether or not there are appropriate grounds for that to occur. To simply say a CRA official in some office somewhere in the land could simply say, I see a crime, I think I'll tell the cops about it, is outrageous. And that's been why all the editorials across the land have said it's not contrary to what others are saying. It's what the Privacy Commissioner has told us, in her opinion, to be a problem. So I just don't understand why we would break with our Canadian traditions in such an obvious way.
To Mr. Bryson.
Further to Mr. Rankin's point, if in fact it's not even clear that CRA has within itself a governance mechanism to deal with this, who would make that determination? At what level within the public service would the authority be vested to make that decision, to engage the RCMP or police directly in a file due to suspected criminal activity? It's a very dangerous decision, and empowering the CRA in a way that I don't even believe the CRA would welcome.
Thank you. We'll go back to Mr. Keddy.
Maybe probably not the final word, but it'll be the final word for me, Mr. Chairman, on this. Let's be clear that the Section 241 of the Act prohibits the use of communication of taxpayer information except as otherwise permitted in that section and other certain provisions of the Act. So, Clause 28 will allow CRA officials to pass information over that they've not been allowed to pass over before, only when it's dealing with a serious crime. Nothing more and nothing less. You can try to make this into something that is not, but this is for serious crimes only to be passed over to law enforcement agency.
Okay, thank you. Can you want to keep the debate going, or Mr. Bryson on this?
Well, we may agree on what would constitute a serious crime. Can Mr. Keddy define what the threshold or trigger of that would provide enough evidence that it ought to be turned over to the police? And who makes that determination within the CRA? So those are important questions, and that's why a judge and a warrant is a tested and true approach to this.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll go to the vote on the amendment on NDP 2. Recorded vote. Okay, recorded vote, NDP 2.
Monsieur Adler. Monsieur Allen. Monsieur Keddy. Monsieur Saxton. Monsieur Van Kesteren. Monsieur Caron. Monsieur Cullen.
Yes.
Monsieur Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Bryson.
Yes.
Okay, the amendment is defeated. Then we have Green Party Amendment 0.1. Not sure why it's 0.1.
Because we've got it.
Thank you,
Okay, all
Mr.
right.
Chair.
I get it. Okay.
So,
Colleagues, it's been our practice at this committee, we have the 5-minute time limit for other parties, is that we allow Ms. May 1 minute to present her amendment. Is that agreeable? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here pursuant to something which should be agreeable to members, since it was a resolution, a motion passed by the committee that summons me here, as opposed to having the rights I used to have at report stage to provide substantive amendments. So I'm in your hands, and I have my minute. In this case, I'm presenting an amendment that's somewhat similar, certainly similar in intent, if not in wording, to what you just defeated in NDP 2. Let me just try to put forward the reasons. And very clearly, the committee had evidence before it, particularly tax law expert Stéphane Elgerat, who pointed out that it's very important to have this requirement, to have the requirement for a judge's permission before the CRA staff reaches out to police. There's a real risk here, both for CRA as an authority, as he put it out, that their role as an authority is both to, quote, ensure that taxes are paid in a civil manner, and that they can also result in criminal prosecutions in a case of tax evasion. It's critical, in other words, that we involve the judiciary. I would say to those who are worried about not getting evidence of tax fraud into the hands of police, I think it's really important to get evidence of tax fraud to the police. I don't want to go over my time, Mr. Chair, just to remind everybody that Al Capone, who was a multiple murderer and famous crook, was caught for tax evasion. But the way to get at that is to have forensic accounting staff on the police forces of Canada, as they do in other nations.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. May. Further discussion to this amendment? Okay. We'll have a vote on this amendment then. All in favor? All opposed? That's defeated, 5-4. We'll then have Clause 28. All in favor of Clause 28? All opposed? Okay, Clause 28 carries. Colleagues, our next amendment deals with Clause 31. Can I show Clauses 29 and 30 carried? On division? Okay, 29 and 30 carry then. We'll move to Clause 31. For Clause 31, we have two amendments. We have NDP 3 and we have Liberal 1. Now, my understanding is we received NDP 3 first. And if NDP 3 is moved, Liberal 1 cannot be proceeded with, as they're identical. So as we received NDP 3 first, we'll deal with NDP 3. With Mr. Cullen.
Yeah, we've had some conversation about this. This might be a rare moment where we maybe get to see something done. This is something that comes from the radical group, the Canadian Certified General Accountants of Canada. You know that bunch. There's one amongst us, Chair. There's one amongst us. This is taken directly. I know Mr. Allen has an alternative strategy that we find some similarity to and will seek to support. We think, taken directly from those that deal with this type of frustration of so many outstanding tax changes that don't get listed. I know the Chair is familiar with this issue as well. It causes a huge impediment to Canadian business. It's very frustrating, cumbersome, extraordinarily expensive, the process that we have right now. Massive bills, omnibus bills come forward every decade, hundreds and hundreds of pages long, overly complex, and the changes that are implemented by government are not kept current. And for those that do the taxes, both personal and business taxes for Canadians, find it incredibly cumbersome. So what we've suggested is something that we see as very reasonable, coming from such a reasonable and wise group as the CGA, would find support from others. I don't know if Mr. Allen wants to speak to the concerns he has with our particular version of the amendment. But we think this would be something that would certainly help small and medium businesses out quite a bit. It would lower the tax costs for Canadians in terms of filing for taxes and what that means to businesses, because that's often lost direct revenue off the bottom line. So I'll leave it at that. I'm not sure if Mr. Bryson wants to add in as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. I have Mr. Allen on the list.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Mr. Cullen. And I had discussions with he and Mr. Bryson as well. There are a number of concerns with legislated tax measures, and as correctly pointed out, there was a 983-page bill just 2 years ago, which was a catch-up of over 10 years. And as originally proposed in the budget bill, the wording was talked about the tabling of these unlegislated tax measures, and what it did talk about was that the government publicly announced after the last general election and before April 1st of the preceding fiscal year preceding the particular fiscal year. And as the CGA Association correctly pointed out, what that wording did was basically the government of the day, even though it could be the same party from between sessions of Parliament, would only be responsible for the unlegislated measures of their particular term, as opposed to maybe hundreds of them that are being out there now and are being actually administered by the CRA in spite of not being legislated. So the amendment that was proposed by CGA Canada, which would have struck out 6 words, basically meaning after the last general election and making it that the government publicly announced before April 1st of the preceding fiscal year, would allow for all those unlegislated measures to be picked up. So I'm definitely in support of that measure in there. But the other side of this, too, is that when the government turns over, I think it's also important for us to recognize one other concept, is that it may take time to get up to speed on what some of those unlegislated measures were before. So my concern was that maybe we should also have a provision in there that would allow the government to get up to speed, and they could have at least 1 year to table that for their first report of a new government. So what that would mean, Mr. Chair, is that we would be facing under amendment, if approved, we would have a full list of unlegislated measures this fall, and then during election year, no, but then 1 year immediately after, we'd have a full report again. So if the opposition parties are open to this idea and proceed to withdraw their proposed amendments, I would propose to table an amendment which I'm prepared to circulate in both official languages, which would capture both those aspects. One is the best spirit of intent of and the actual wording of the NDP and Liberal motion, and it would also add in the 5th day. The obligation to table does not apply in respect of a particular fiscal year if there are no specific legislative proposals to be included in the referred to in subsection 2, or the 5th day on which the House of Commons is sitting after October 31st of the particular fiscal year is less than 12 months after the last general election. So if the opposition parties were open to withdrawing theirs, I thank them for their efforts in their amendments, and I think that's in the spirit of this, that I would add that section, and I would table this for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allen. I have Mr. Bryson on the list. Do the other members of the committee have that amendment, or prospective amendment, I should say?
We've seen it in electronic.
Okay, why don't we, Mr. Allen, if we could get this passed around, so we won't consider that amendment. Yeah, no one. We'll have the ledge clerks look at it as well. Okay. We'll go to Mr. Bryson.
Just on this, I mean, our amendment accomplishes the same as, or proposes to do the same as the NDP amendment. There's no reason why we can't vote on the NDP amendment and then carry on from there. We recognize that in consultation with stakeholders, we could live with the Conservative amendment as well, and we appreciate the consideration for the next government as well. It's a very generous, in fact, of understanding the challenges of coming into government and dealing with those issues early on, and we'll remember that very fondly and respectfully as well. That the transition team will certainly recognize Mr. Allen and his colleagues.
Patronage appointment for them?
Turks and Caicos.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We'll go back to Mr. Cullen, please.
Yeah, Chair, I think there's just a bit of, we might have insufficient copies for all members. So what I might suggest is, I'm not sure, it puts certain members at a disservice if they don't have the actual amendment that we may be voting on. So why don't we just stand on this for just a minute, move on to the next clause, if that works for you. Just because typically committees, I don't know if the chair has seen it himself, but it's just a discomfort if people have to vote on something they haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I can either. Do you want to table this for now?
Yes, I'm talking not a long delay, like a few minutes until the copies come back.
Okay, let's table it till the end of part 1 then. Okay. Okay, so colleague, I don't have amendments for clauses 32 to 39. Are there any that members wish to speak to, if they can identify them?
Perhaps breaking up the votes a little bit. If we can go 32 through 34.
32 to 34? Okay.
And then seek out a vote on 35, and then continue 36 through 49, if that works for you, Chair.
Okay, perfect. So shall clauses 32 to 34 carry? Yes? They carry. We'll have a vote on clause 35. You want a recorded vote? Recorded vote on clause 35.
Monsieur Adler. Monsieur Allen. Monsieur Keddy. Monsieur Saxton. Monsieur Van Kesteren. Monsieur Caron. Monsieur Collin. Monsieur Rankin. Monsieur Bryson.
Okay. Clause 35 carries, 6-3. Shall clauses 36 to 39 carry?
Yes.
Yes. They carry. Okay. Do colleagues want a little more time with the issue with Mr. NDP amendment, Mr. Allen, or are we ready to return to that?
I think we can return back to it.
Okay, so we'll go back to
If I could,
NDP 3.
I think there might be just one more comment to add from me, and I think Mr. Allen as well,
Sure.
before we go to the vote. Did you want to go ahead, Mike?
Mr. Allen, do you want to speak further on that?
Yeah, I would just like some procedural guidance from you, Mr. Chair, on this. I think there's a couple of ways this could play out. Number one is the withdrawal of the two motions, and then we table this one as the motion. Or, I guess if we're going to go to one of the others and vote on NDP 1, then I think procedurally I would have to table or put it as a sub-amendment for the second half of that change. Because if we're going to, I think, do we have to do a sub-amendment, or is it a separate motion? I defer to your guidance on that as to how we handle that.
So I guess what we need clarity on is whether the NDP still and the Liberals still wish to move either one of their amendments.
I think we do, but certainly not to interrupt the larger effort. We see Mr. Allen's amendment as an improvement. It's not, we're biased. It's not as good as the one we wanted. So we wouldn't mind having that vote if that's possible, but we don't want to sabotage the larger effort. So if that is what's at stake, I didn't hear the entire advice that you got, Chair. So if we can move NDP, see it move through. If it's defeated, so be it. And that still allows Mr. Allen to move his amendment, then we're fine with that process to go ahead. That works? I think that's the way we have to do it. Well, we could do it the other way, but we wouldn't mind seeing a vote on ours.
Yeah. So this could be the government.
The option is to, the amendment, the prospective amendment by Mr. Allen, he could amend the NDP amendment with B. That's one option. So why don't,
that would work as well.
Mr. Allen, why don't you move B, and I suspect the committee would be favorable to that.
So I think we would move Part B. Okay, so the sub amendment to the first one would be by replacing Clause 31 be amended by replacing lines 6 to 9 on page 25 with the following exception. The obligation to table does not apply in respect of a particular fiscal year if, A, there are no specific legislative proposals to be included in the list referred to in subsection 2, or B, the fifth day on which the House of Commons is sitting after October 31st of the particular fiscal year is less than 12 months after the last general election. And, so that would be the amendment.
Okay. So all those in favor of, that amendment is in order then? All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment? Sub-amendment? Okay, that's carried. Then all those in favor of NDP 3 as amended? as amended. Okay, that's unanimous as well.
You all right, Andrew? Andrew pulled a muscle there.
Okay, the NDP has amended a budget bill. So
NDP's in the budget there. There's the headline tomorrow in the Globe and Mail finance section.
The vote on the clause.
okay, so the vote is on Clause 31 as amended. All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous then. All right. So we've dealt with Part 1. I thank our officials for Part 1. We'll call the officials forward for Part 2. Now, colleagues, with Part 2, amendments to the Excise Tax Act, GST, HST measures, I have no amendment from Clause 40 to 49. Can I group them together? Shall clauses 40 to 49 carry? Okay. Clauses 40 to 49 carry. Clause 50, we have NDP 4. Can I have someone speak to NDP 4? Mr. Rankin?
Well, thanks, Chair. This amendment, NDP 4, is virtually identical, certainly in intent and perhaps in text, to what we had moved in the context of one that was defeated just a moment ago. And that is the same provision that we dealt with on warrantless disclosure of taxpayer information in Clause 28, which was defeated. The language is very, very similar, and once again, it would allow an official to provide a law enforcement officer with this information with absolutely no court oversight. And our concern is the same here as it was there, and indeed I should foreshadow that we have another one with the same intent later, Mr. Chair. We don't know who this official is. It could be, the term is not defined. It could be anybody. I guess it could be somebody who's working temporarily in some regional office of the CRA, giving to the police some night information that this person with no law training, no knowledge of criminal law, considers to be a serious offense of some sort, providing confidential taxpayer information for that purpose. It is so contrary to the way we do business in Canada that people are lining up to take a run at this in court. It just seems so unnecessary and so contrary to our traditions to proceed in this way that we make the same amendment with that same goal to defeat that really un-Canadian approach that the government is taking. Conservatives have really stepped out on this one, and it's not the way we've done business in Canada. It's an infringement of civil liberties. That's why so many people across the country and our Privacy Commissioner have blown the whistle on this.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion, Mr. Keddy?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, we have to keep things in perspective here, and this is not an infringement of civil liberties. This is preventing when a criminal offense has been committed, it brings that criminal offense to light and allows the police to take charge and lay charge to intervene and lay charges. To say that this is some type of nefarious piece of legislation that allows highly trained civil servants, whether they be CRA officials or police officials, to run amok is simply not fair to what this amendment does, to what it does.
Okay, thank you.
Clause does.
Further to this, Mr. Cullen?
We don't get to often use our officials, so that's. I'm just wondering, the constitutional checks, one of the questions we're raising about this is around that balance between the rights of the individual and protecting Canadians writ large. I wonder, Mr. Cook, you're nodding, so I may put the question to you for no other reason than you're nodding.
I understand the question.
Do you understand the discussion we're trying to have here in terms of that balance and the definition, as Mr. Rankin has talked about, of official, that potential of infringement and potential of future court cases? Has the government gone through what you used to call a charter test, seeking out advice from justice in terms of the percentage of, it's always done by a percentage of hopefulness in defending it against a charter challenge? Could you inform the committee?
If I might respond by making a couple of comments. First, in respect of your specific question, and I think the answer is generally the same that's been provided with respect to similar question in respect of Part 5, is that in terms of constitutionality, according to Section 4.1 of the Department of Justice Act, the Minister of Justice shall examine every bill in order to ascertain whether any of the provisions of the bill are inconsistent with the purposes and provisions of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So that obligation has been discharged in respect of this bill.
If I may, Chair, sorry, there was a specific test that has been suggested. There's always a percentage used. My specific question, I appreciate what you're saying in terms of the process that gets used. The government typically seeks a percentage chance. That's what the advice from the department comes back to Justice. Was there any on this particular issue that was sought, and was there a deemed percentage that was given back from the Department of Justice?
And well, just in response to that, I'm prohibited from discussing any legal opinions or legal advice that the department may or may not have received in respect of any provision. It's just something I'm not capable of speaking to. I guess what I was thinking. Well, it's just if it would be useful to the committee, I can talk a little bit about the CRA process.
You want to hear the?
We had a specific question that Mr. Rankin raised around what deemed official would be the one that would citing this and be of training capacity or a professional ability to deem an offense that's been taking place.
In terms of the process, the CRA has a criminal investigations program which is responsible for conducting investigations in respect of tax-related offenses, and they'll work closely with the RCMP. In terms of the serious offenses evidence, talking to the CRA, they almost evidence of those offenses almost always arises in the context of a criminal investigations program investigation, and most commonly in the context of a search and seizure. And those are actually done by way of search warrant. So what happens is the criminal investigation program approaches a justice of the peace and demonstrates reasonable grounds to believe that a tax offense has been committed. The justice of the peace will issue a search warrant, and then the CRA will go to the search location with the RCMP. The RCMP accompanies in order to ensure the safety of the CRA officials. If, for example, the RCMP sees illegal firearms or drugs at the search location, they may be seized immediately. And what most commonly happens is the CRA will search on site. They'll look at the computers there, and if they have evidence that relate to the offense for which the search warrant has been obtained, then they'll be able to seize the computers, and then when they return to the CR base, they'll search, and that may provide.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just for brevity, let me just focus on the question a little bit better then. You've described a scenario in which the RCMP is doing a criminal investigation or potential criminal investigation. CRA tags along. Is under the changes under this bill, is that the only way it can happen? Is there another scenario in which CRA can, of its own volition, initiate some response without that warrant process that you just talked about in the scenario you described?
It's possible. The CRA is implementing an agency-wide mandate that before any information will be provided, what will happen is it will go to the criminal investigations program. It will be provided to headquarters. Headquarters criminal investigations program, who are used to dealing with the criminal code and things like that, will make an evaluation of that evidence, and if it satisfies the requirement of reasonable grounds to believe, then at that point it may be provided almost entirely to the RCMP.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rankin on this.
Thank you. Mr. Cook, just as you heard perhaps when I was speaking to my amendment, I talked about the section saying an official may provide to an appropriate police organization confidential information if the official has reasonable grounds to believe this and that. And I said it could be a low-level official in the CRA talking to a police organization of any description. does that, in terms of the reading, have I read this section properly? There's no reference, for example, to the Criminal Investigation Division. There's no reference to oversight by the Commissioner. There's no kind of chain of command within CRA that's alluded to. Any official of any description could speak to any police organization. And Mr. Keddy said where there is a criminal offense that has been committed. It doesn't say that, of course. It says where that official has reasonable grounds to believe that there'll be information to afford evidence that there was a crime. So my question is, was I wrong in the way I portrayed it? Is that your reading of the statute as well?
You don't have to say whether he's wrong. Just say.
Was my interpretation correct in terms of the reading of the bill?
Perhaps clarify in terms of the official.
Well, there is a definition of official. I'm speaking about Part 1 of the Income Tax Act, and there's, I believe, a definition. We're talking about the GST provisions at the moment. There's a definition of official, and it simply provides that an official is a person in the service of Her Majesty in the right of Canada or a province. What I've been speaking to is the actual process that the CRA is implementing to manage the authority that would be granted under the provision.
Okay. Okay. Is this clarifying, or is this?
Yes, it's clarifying.
It's clarifying.
He said.
Okay, Mr. Rankin.
Mr. Cook, when you talked about the general procedure where there's a search warrant issued by a justice of the peace where there's reasonable grounds to believe this an offense, why that's not what would apply in this? If I'm interpreting this bill correctly, that's not what would be done in the current circumstance. Am I correct?
Sorry, I'm not sure which circumstance you're referring to.
If this amendment goes through, Clause 50 that we're debating were to go through, there would be no search warrant JP, Justice of the Peace provision. It would simply be an official, as you say, anybody, being able to turn over whatever he or she thinks as reasonable grounds to believe would constitute an offense.
No, that doesn't change the search warrant process. What I've explained is very often the kind of information that the CRA would like to turn over to the police is actually information that has been acquired in the course of executing a search warrant. Even though the information has been acquired in the course of executing a search warrant, because it's been extracted or just realized what the import of the information is sometime after the execution of the search warrant, the CRA is prohibited, even though it was acquired under a search warrant, from providing that to a police organization.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's very helpful. So NDP 4 then. All in favor of NDP 4? I see 4. All opposed? I see 5. NDP 4 is defeated. Shall Clause 50 carry? All in favor? On division? Okay, on division. Colleagues, I do not have an amendment for clauses 51 to 61.
We can go, if you wouldn't mind, 51 through 55.
Okay, shall clauses 51 to 55 carry?
Yep.
Yes, they carry. We'll go to clause 56.
Small note here. This is maybe one of those happy occasions where the process we're in right now is omnibus legislation, and part of the bill is being used to fix previous omnibus legislation. So we're happy that once this was identified by Canadians and particularly hospitals and those visiting family members in hospital that they were being taxed this way, the government had to stand down. We can only imagine through these other hundreds of clauses in this bill where we'll be back here next year fixing things in this fantastic piece of legislation, and we thank the government for seeing the light and the pressure from so many Canadians. So we'll be in favor, and we're going to ask for a recorded vote on this one just to fully feel the moment, Chair.
Okay, and I'm sure the government appreciates your description of the fantastic piece of legislation.
I'm sure they quote that widely.
I'll go to Mr. Bryson on this.
Let's be very clear on Clause 56 and 57 and what they actually accomplished, because while Clauses 58 to 60 remove the GST or HST on hospital parking, which we support, Clauses 56 and 57 will have the opposite effect. In fact, Clauses 56 and 57 reduce the scope of an exception that allows charities to provide GST-free parking in certain cases. So that's it's an elaborate way of saying that clauses 56 and 57 will actually have the effect of adding GST and HST to certain parking services provided by charities. So we do not support Clause 56 and 57 and view this as a tax grab on charities. So we actually oppose these two amendments.
Okay. So is a recorded vote then, do we want this on 56 or 58?
But Mr. Bryson, we'll hold off till 58 for the
Okay.
recorded vote.
56 on recorded vote on 56.
Mr. Adler. Mr. Allen. Mr. Keddy. Mr. Saxton. Mr. Van Kesteren. Mr. Caron. Mr. Cullen. Mr. Rankin. Mr. Bryson.
Okay. Clause 56 carries. We'll have a recorded vote on Clause 57 then. You want to, Mr. Bryson, you want to record it on this one as well? You want to record it on this one?
57 as well.
Recorded.
Mr. Adler. Mr. Allen. Mr. Keddy. Mr. Saxton. Mr. Van Kesteren. Mr. Caron. Mr. Cullen. Mr. Rankin. Mr. Bryson.
Okay. Clause 57 carries.
Yeah.
So I think you want a recorded vote on 58, I presume.
Yeah, we'll take just the one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, recorded vote on 58.
Mr. Adler. Mr. Allen.
Yes.
Mr. Keddy. Mr. Saxton.
Yes.
Mr. Van Kesteren. Mr. Caron. Mr. Cullen. Mr. Rankin. Mr. Bryson.
It's unanimous, right?
Yeah.
Okay, shall clauses 59 to 61 carry? Yes? Okay, thank you. Colleagues, we'll move to Part 3. I want to thank our officials for Part 2. We'll move to Part 3, amendments of the Excise Tax, 2001, the Excise Tax, and the Air Travelers Security Charge Act. This deals with clauses 62 to 90. I do not have an amendment from 62 to 74. Can I group those clauses?
Say again,
62 to 74, there's no amendment. There's an amendment for Clause 75, which is NDP 5.
Yeah, you can group those, Chair.
Okay, shall clauses 62 to 74 carry? Yes. Okay, those clauses carry. We'll go to Clause 75, and we have NDP 5, and we'll go to Mr. Cullen. Mr. Rankin. Mr. Rankin, NDP 5.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is essentially the same amendment we've sought in other contexts about providing for court oversight of the transfer of confidential taxpayer information to the police. It seems to me that the arguments I would make are identical to those I made earlier.
Rankin. On this, Mr. Bryson.
Amendment, and we agree with this amendment, support this amendment for consistent with the arguments we made earlier.
Okay, thank you. All in favor of NDP 5 then? Recorded vote, NDP 5.
Mr. Adler. Mr. Allen. Mr. Keddy. Mr. Saxton. Mr. Van Kesteren. Mr. Caron. Mr. Cullen.
Yes.
Mr. Rankin.
Yes.
Mr. Bryson.
Okay, that amendment is defeated. We'll then go to Clause 75. Shall Clause 75 carry? On division? On division? On division. Colleagues, I do not have an amendment for Clauses 76 to 90. Can I group those clauses? Shall Clauses 76 to 90 carry? Yes, those clauses carry. Thank you. Thank you. We will go to Part 4. We have customs tariff. clauses 91 to 98. I do not have any amendments for this part and for these clauses. Can I group these clauses, or is there one?
Then we're going to see some on division and some in favor.
Okay, so shall clauses 91 and 92 carry? They carry, and then we'll go to clause 93. Clause 93 carry on division? Okay. 94 on division. 95? 4. Clause 95 carries unanimously. Clause 96 on division. Clause 97? Yes, that carries. Clause 98 on division. Yep, Mr. Cullen.
I think we're coming up to the clock. We're just about to get into the meat of Part 4 here on FATCA.
Part 5.
Excuse me. Part 5 on, was your hope to, I'm not sure if you wanted to get into Part 5. You expressed the intention of just getting through 4 today.
Just to 4, so we're finished where we're...
So if we made you happy, Chair, that's the most important question.
Oh,
I had.
absolutely.
Okay.
I'm very pleased with all of you.
Oh, whoa, no. Our stickers in order. Do we get gold stars or any such thing?
Dealing with this, as you mentioned, this fantastic piece of budget.
That's the headline.
Okay, so colleagues, we'll start with Part 5 at 3:30 on Thursday. Yeah, you want to do that offline?
Okay, sure. Whatever works.
Okay. All right, thank you. Colleagues, if we could have just some members, we'll talk about the meeting tomorrow because the votes are going to interrupt it. So. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.